Yo, what is up? Welcome back to the Hurdle on the Executives of Fantasy Football YouTube channel and on Player Profiler on Tuesday nights. It is 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I am Cody Carpentier, joined as always by my main man, Matty Kiwoom. And this week we're back talking more AFC. Last week we talked about the North and the South, and this was a little Civil War action. This week we're talking about the East and the West, AFC East and AFC West. We'll be walking through all 8 teams, discussing positions that we think they need to focus in on. There's only 2 new general managers in the AFC East and the AFC West. That's Joe Ortiz from the Chargers and Elliott Wolf up there in Matty's country with the New England Patriots. Matty, how's your Tuesday?
Tuesday's going good. A lot of driving today, for the old day job. But with a lot of driving comes a lot of thinking. I've been thinking a lot about these teams.
I know you've been turned on to the local radio. That is for sure. So we'll talk about them here in a minute as I go to pull something up, and of course get hit with an ad of a big juicy butt on my screen. That's fantastic. Thanks Twitter. Appreciate
distraction,
you.
Huh?
Little curveball. They just threw a little distraction at me. Yeah. So click that like button, click subscribe, stay tuned in, stay tapped in. Every Tuesday, Wednesday night, we're here live, 7 p.m. Eastern Time with the Hurdle. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we have the Draft Rankings podcast. Yesterday, Matty had his Big Board Top 100 solo show. Mine will be on Wednesday, my Big Board Top 100 solo show. And then Friday, we'll reconvene for our third podcast on the Draft Rankings. You can listen to those on podcast or on YouTube. That's 5 shows every single week. You can tap in, tune in over there at thedraftrankings.com. Matty, let's jump into the AFC West first and foremost. Let's start out with the Las Vegas Raiders. Las Vegas Raiders currently have Tom Telesco as their general manager. He is a new general manager for the Raiders, but he has been in the AFC West since 2013, which makes him the longest standing general manager of both of these divisions, all the AFC West and all of the AFC East. Tom Telesco switches. The Raiders need a little bit of help. They need a little quarterback action. They need a little bit of offensive line, defensive line. Where are you starting with the Raiders here? They're picking at pick 13 overall, and currently they have Aiden O'Connell as their quarterback and Antonio Pierce as their head coach. It feels like there's a lot of question mark when it comes to what the Raiders are, what their identity is, and how this build may continue, because I feel like they're in the middle of just what are they in the middle of it? I can't really tell.
Yeah, they're in some sort of transformation to this new AP era. They got to figure out what's the identity with Antonio Pierce as the coach. But when I look at their roster, I think they need some improvements at all the positions they have back in the title. They need a new quarterback. They need some cornerbacks, and they could damn sure use some depth at running back. I don't know if Zamir White and Alexander Madison is exactly the 1-2 punch that would really help this type of team. What I envision this team is going to be a little bit conservative offense, playing good defense, letting Max Crosby rain hell on opposing quarterbacks. So you're going to have to bolster up that running back room as well. But I think in the first round, they're in the prime spot. Well, I don't know if it's a prime spot, but they're in a spot where they're going to have to make a big damn decision. Do they reach on a quarterback, or do they take the best cornerback on the board?
I think that's the biggest question, I think, of all when you look at this roster and what they've done so far this spring, which is, to be honest, not a ton when it comes to really fulfilling the roster. They spent a large sum of money on Christian Wilkins to come play D tackle, and that's really it. Like you mentioned, Alexander Madison, Gardner Minshew, Harrison Bryant, all backups on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't bring in any offensive linemen. They didn't bring in anything on the back end at DB. So in this mock that I'm working through right now, I had Terrion Arnold going to them at 13. I think had they not taken Tyree Wilson, I think Leatu Latu would be perfect on the opposite side of Max Crosby because they kind of have the similar motor. Was there a player that you feel is a dialed-in draft selection for the Raiders at this point? I feel like we've talked about them a lot being corner whether it's Quinion or Terrion or Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Any other positions you would look at there in the first round?
I think we really need to start coming to grips with the fact that Michael Penix might be the selection there at 13. I think he's at least by the buzz. I can't speak for the general managers. Of course, they're keeping everything hush-hush. But from the buzz, it sounds like Michael Penix is now safely slotted into that QB5 in the class. So if the top 4 go off the board before their selection, I think they're going to be really tempted to take Penix there. Penix kind of checks a lot of the boxes in terms of being able to push the ball downfield, something that these quarterbacks they have on the roster just simply can't do.
The Los Angeles Chargers have Joe Ortiz, a first-year general manager, coming over, and they have some holes in their offense, which is led by Darius Davis in the slot, Josh Palmer out wide with Quentin Johnston. The fourth and only other receiver on the roster is Simi Fehoko. There's a question in the chat from Sugar Dunkerton. He says, over-under on wide receivers Chargers take in this draft. I feel like that number is probably 2.5. If it was, I think it's got to be 2.5. You think it's 1.5 in the draft?
I think it's in the whole draft. I think people are going to be shocked with the lack of attention that they give to this position. I think people are going to be truly shocked. There's going to be a lot of screaming at the TV by Chargers fans as they pass on Malik Neighbors, pass on Rome Odunze, and the passing on the second tier. I think that they probably double dip in your Roman Wilson. I know that's kind of the layup because of the Michigan tie, but the Roman Wilson tier, Javon Baker, Brendan Rice, Malik Washington, all the way through those tiers. So basically in our ranks, anywhere from, say, wide receiver 10 to wide receiver 15. That's where I think that they'll double dip, but I don't think they go more than 2.
They did add Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst in the tight end room. They also have Donald Parham still on the roster and Stone Smart, college free agent from a couple years ago. It does feel like you might be right with them adding. They got Ben Mason, the fullback that came from Michigan a couple years ago, and they added more running backs, the big bruisers, adding multiple tight ends. Maybe they go light in the wide receiver room and they only walk into the season with 6. That could possibly be the answer. But on the inverse, my argument to that would be there's only 4 on the roster. You draft 3, that's 7. You bring in, 1 or 2 guys as camp bodies, that's 8, 9. You have to account for some injuries. Like Jalen Guyton's not on the roster right now, but maybe they bring Jalen. I don't know that he wasn't in this regime. So I feel like going into camp with 6 might be a little light for my taste. Another guy they added this year was Gus Edwards as a running back. They have Isaiah Spiller currently as the number 2. Larry Roundtree was on this roster a few years ago. He's now in the UFL. If you watched that this weekend, pretty good. A lot of bums like Larry Roundtree are in there. Elijah Dotson's also on this roster. On the defensive side of the ball, they added Denzel Perryman, who came back to the Chargers, Christian Fulton from Tennessee, and Poona Ford from the Buffalo Bills. Poona. I'm interested with this number 5 overall pick in what they do. I think it's a very it feels like it might be the bottleneck on this draft going nuts, which is they stay put and they take Alt, who has never played right tackle, and they just say, hey, Schlater, move over to right, or they make Alt learn right. Those conversations are definitely part of the pre-draft process where they go, hey, have you played right? Can you play right? They go talk to Rashawn. Hey, Rashawn, can you move over to right? Do you feel comfortable? If he's not, that's why I think there's an inkling of J.C. Latham from Alabama. I think there's a little inkling there where they like him because he can play pure right. They could trade back. They could trade back and trade back to 10, 11, 12 with one of these quarterback needy teams. Or I think the third answer would be, so you stay put, you draft a tackle, you move back, you probably take a tackle, or you stay put and you go Neighbors. And I feel like that's losing steam as the days go by, them going receiver, even though it, like you alluded to, if you put that number 1.5, taking a Neighbors or an Odunze allows you to not have to grab another one until 6-7, round 6-7, or maybe the UDFA.
And remember who the offensive coordinator is now. I mean, sure, he could have changed his philosophy, but Greg Roman is a run first, run second, run third. I'll use one wide receiver type of OC. And if he looks at his roster and he goes, listen, Jim, I don't hate Josh Palmer. I think Quentin Johnson has more in the tank. All of a sudden, the priority to take someone early goes down even more. And I think we're at 5. There's something about Harbaugh's ego to me, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but I think there's something in him that's going to find gratification with anointing his protege his landing spot. So something tells me that he's going to be a little extra motivated to move out of 5 if McCarthy's there at 5. I think he's going to want to be able to usher in his guy, the guy he calls the best Michigan quarterback of all time, to the situation that gives JJ a chance to win, which, coincidentally, is the team with the best treasure trove of picks that can move up, the Minnesota Vikings.
Another team that is looking to do that, but when we're doing these mock drafts, they make it tough because of this exact thing you're alluding to is, does Harbaugh want to move back with a team that's in his division? We talked about the Raiders a minute ago. Now we're going to talk about the Denver Broncos, who have to be sniffing around or content on sitting still or moving back and taking a Nix or a Penix, whatever, doesn't matter, maybe Rattler. But Denver, George Paton's been there since 2021. They have not been overly successful since. They traded away Jerry Jeudy to the Cleveland Browns this year, signed Josh Reynolds just last week. So the receiving room is Cortland Sutton, Josh Reynolds, Marvin Mims, kind of the polar opposite of the Chargers, where they currently have 10 guys on the depth chart, all the way down to David Sills and Jalen Virgil. Shout out App State. On the offensive line, they did bring in 3 backups. On the defensive side of the ball, they signed Brandon Jones from the Dolphins, Malcolm Roach from New Orleans, and Cody Barton from Washington to play inside linebacker. Denver, my immediate thoughts, again, we talked about it earlier. It's obviously quarterback, but my second one is corner. We did a show today on Roster Watch talking about our favorite landing spots for players in the NFL draft this year. And one of the defenders I talked about was Quinyon Mitchell going to the Jets to pair up with Sauce Gardner. I feel like Denver's a spot that could run up to the podium and take one of these Alabama guys. And it sounds dumb, right? Like, oh, well, they already got Pat Surtain from Alabama. What, is that your easy connection, is just to go take an Alabama guy? I mean, it's pretty simple. Like, they worked with Pat Surtain, and this would really complete and complement this defense very well if you could get a Terrion or a Kool-Aid if they sat still. But again, I think that all hinges on quarterback. Right now, round 1, it feels like quarterback is the main focus. Pass rush and defensive backs. I think they all 3 work in motion together. You get a pass rush, it makes it easier on the back end. You have a good back end, it makes it easier on the pass rush. And then everything, of course, hinges on quarterback. Those are kind of the 3 areas I'm looking at for the Broncos. What do you think about the Broncos in 2024?
I think when I look at this roster, this was the roster they should have put together going into last season. This is the type of roster that would have put them safely in the top 3. Then they would have had their choice at quarterback, because now, again, they're in the similar situation as the Raiders. Harbaugh's not going to not let them move up. He's just not. He'd have to take something from their soul, a Max Crosby or a Pat Surtain. He's going to have to take something from the soul of these franchises if he's going to move back and send his protege into the division. So they're in a no man's land where they either have to reach on this next tier of quarterbacks, or do they play it safe and just wait to see what happens? Now, unlike the Raiders, Broncos have no second-round pick. So they're really between a rock and a hard place at QB, where they're going to have to pull the trigger at 12 or wait to see who's there in the 3rd round, which is a really tough bargain given the quarterbacks and probably the frenzy that's going to happen at the position. One thing I could see them do if they do stick and pick is take best D lineman available, because of Byron Murphy, a Johnny Newton. You bring a player like that onto this roster, you're bringing in a guy that can help in the run and in the pass. Last year, Denver was one of the worst defenses against opposing rushes, so they need to stop the bleeding with opposing rushes, and bringing in a guy like Newton and especially bringing in a Byron Murphy would help.
That Byron Murphy one, it kind of fits. The Denver connection makes a lot of sense, and another kind of dorky part of the process of mocks and all that stuff is making it in your, if I can visualize something, it makes like 10 times more sense in my head, and I can visualize the hell out of Byron Murphy in New Orleans and in Denver. Like, those are just easy ones there. I could just close my eyes and I can think, He would wreck ship in either one of those places.
For sure.
So I really like that one. The fourth and final team in the AFC West is the reigning, defending, back-to-back world champs, the Kansas City Chiefs, who signed Hollywood Brown this offseason. They got Carson Wentz now to be a backup for Patrick Mahomes, maybe a little rejuvenation, probably not. Irv Smith from Cincinnati talking about rejuvenation, now slated to be the backup to Noah Gray. And on defense, they didn't touch anything. They just traded away L'Jarius Sneed for a third-round pick next year. The defense, they've been spending a lot of capital on as the course of the last couple years have gone by in the NFL draft. Last year, it was Felix Anudike-Uzomah, who we didn't really see much on the field. 2 years ago, it was George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie that they drafted in round 1. Of course, on the interior, they had Chris Jones, Derek Nandi. They don't really need help on the interior, but I do think looking as a need down line, which is something they've done very well over the last couple of years, is drafting in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th rounds for long-term replacements. And Chris Jones keeps getting these contracts. He wants to stay, et cetera, but he's also aging, right? He's going into his 9th season this year. And one guy that I think fits this defense sick is from Northern Iowa. He probably needs a little bit of time in a defense to get warmed up and get ramped up. He's coming from the FCS level, but he's a menace. He's down to the Shrine Bowl. Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa. Just like this is one of those things we just talked about with Byron Murphy. Kansas City doesn't really have a lot of holes. Everybody knows that, right? The offensive line, they've bang, 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 bang. They could, of course, take a tackle. They got Wanya Morris from Oklahoma last year in round 3. He's not exactly your ideal left tackle. They've been swinging through these tackles left and right side the last 3 years. It doesn't matter. They just win championships. Wide receiver, of course, we've talked about it. Everybody loves Xavier Worthy thought. And then I think interior defensive line is a long-term replacement. Then, of course, you can probably talk about corner. Any of those ring a bell, or do you have any preferences among other spots?
I think there's a good shot that they move up in this draft. I think it's a good spot for them to get aggressive, because I think that if they were to move, I know we did, go over the draft rankings channel on YouTube. We did the Seahawks, and in that we had them moving back, but their partner was the Chiefs moving up. And in my mock 4.0 that I'm working on, I also am going to carry that into that mock, because I think it makes a lot of sense. Moving up 10 picks, 12 picks, wherever they have to, and landing the difference maker at corner or tackle. They could stay pat, but then they're playing with fire and looking at like a TJ Tampa and Enos Rakestraw, really the not second rate, but it's definitely below tier cornerback. And then at tackle, is it Kingsu Matia? Is it Jordan Morgan that falls?
Yep.
I don't know if they want to stay pat at tackle. And if they move up, they get a little aggressive, decide that, let's continue to invest in the here and the now. Then they can land, it could be a Graham Barton. Maybe they're able to get in the range to get a Troy Fautanu, or my personal dream for this team is moving up for Cooper DeJean. Tell me Cooper DeJean is not a damn near 1-for-1 replacement, at least stylistically, with L'Jarius Sneed. Can make the tackles, can hit the run, crazy athletic, tough, mean son of a bee.
Let's stand DeJean for just 1 second. We're halfway through the show. We're going to jump into the AFC East here in a second. If you do like what you're watching, please click that like button. Please click subscribe. We are live on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time as well, on the Executives of Fantasy Football YouTube channel. And you can catch us Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the Draft Rankings podcast. But you bring up Cooper DeJean. He's been a forefront of conversation because of the athleticism that he showed yesterday at his pro day. And the conversations have come back full circle. We talk about the flat circle of the NFL draft and what Cooper DeJean has: 6'1", 202, 4.45, 38.5-inch vertical, 10'4" broad jump. DeJean currently have him as a top 25 player in the draft and rising. How high is he going to rise? You talk about the Chiefs have to trade up. Alex says he thinks it's a DetroitLion.com. That's what he thinks Cooper DeJean is. I think he fits in a number of these defenses. Is he going to start getting the mega push that we've seen and heard from the the Graham Barton conversations, the JJ McCarthy conversations, whoever Talifuaga from a month ago, the Darius Robinson push. Are we going to get a Cooper DeJean push for the rest of this week? And as we get closer to the draft, and how far up do you think that could potentially get?
I think that the buzz around the NFL draft is that he will be cornerback 2 behind Quinion, but I think what we'll end up seeing is the draft being a flat circle. The reason why we say that a million times, it's so true, and where Terrion ends up coming off the board earlier than people predict in their mocks, because kind of what we thought to be true a month ago tends to be more accurate than what we're following now. But the fact of the matter is, who is available for the Chiefs at 32 is going to solely depend on the run of what position in the draft. It's either if there's a mean, vicious tackle run, then it could be DeJean. If there's a run a corner, probably not going to be DeJean. Probably won't be there. If there's a run on, let's say, edge, let's say it goes Verse and Turner, who we expect to be first rounders, but let's say it gets into the Chop Robinsons and maybe even, obviously Letu is going to be a first rounder. So let's say there's a run on edges. Well, then maybe they could stay pat at 32, but I don't know if they want to play that guessing game when they can move up, move a pick this year, get into the range where they are in control to take the player that they've scouted and feel most confident in.
I like it. All right, let's talk about the New York Jets and the rest of the AFC East. Of course, the general manager for the JETS Jets is Joe Douglas, been there since 2019. They, of course, lost Aaron Rodgers week 1 last year with that torn Achilles. Looks like he'll be back in full-fledged. They got Tyrod Taylor now on the roster behind him. Zach Wilson's still hanging on there. We'll see if he doesn't get moved before the draft or maybe after. They brought in 2 tackles, Tyron Smith from Dallas, Morgan Moses from Baltimore, 2 guys that have not been healthy the last couple of years. Their swing tackle, currently Carter Warren, not exactly the definition of depth or high-end output, I would say. And it's kind of making sense as far as the entire team build here. It's extremely, extremely, extremely volatile on this offense with Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, Rodgers now coming off an Achilles, Hall's a year removed from an ACL. I'm not saying he's volatile, but I'm just adding him in here for conversation. Mike Williams hasn't been able to stay healthy. Elijah Vera-Tucker hasn't played a full season yet. Very volatile on this New York Jet offense, and leaves question to, do you bring in a receiver so that the impending Mike Williams injury doesn't hurt you as bad? Do you bring in a tackle to kind of save that impending injury, save the season from an impending injury costing you everything? On the defensive side of the ball, they brought in Javon Kinlaw, one of my favorite defensive linemen from a few years ago in the draft, to San Francisco, and recently Hassan Reddick from the Philadelphia Eagles through Carolina, through Arizona. He's been just hopping around over the last couple of years. The JETS Jets, 1 first-round pick here, picking at 10, no second, and a third. Where are you looking round 1? Because I think this is one of the, also, we talk about the Chargers. This is a very, very interesting draft selection here. Tackle, receiver. Like I said before, maybe corner. That would be like the random, I don't know, random dart they might throw is Quignon's there. You just take him and you just say, you know what, screw you guys. You ain't gonna be able to throw on us. But it feels like tackle or receiver is the move.
I was leading the train that they'd go offense, they'd go Bowers, they'd go Dunzy. But the more I look at the depth chart, the more I think about this team. But I'm thinking to myself, Cody, I'm thinking they'd be a bunch of dang fools to not go O-line there at 10. There's going to be receivers available in the 3rd round that I think are pretty well suited to help this offense. Some names that come to mind. I mean, how well would a Brendan Rice look in the 3rd round if he's there? How good would a Javon Baker look being able to play across from Garrett Wilson and let Mike Williams just hobble around, try to stay healthy? Roman Wilson, Ricky Pierce. There's a lot of guys later that I think I'd be more comfortable with. At 10, there's 3 players that if I was running the team, if I was Joe Douglas, this would be the 3 guys that I'd be choosing from. It's either going to be Talisi Fuaga, Troy Faltaunu, or Graham Barton, or J.C. Latham. Make it 4. Because those guys can start at guard and kick out the tackle if someone gets hurt. You cannot go into this build, this team, this winning window, and hope and pray that 33-year-old tackles that haven't really been healthy stay healthy. Now, getting
Yep.
Veritaka inside, good move. You want to keep him there. But you got to get some insurance, and there's really, really good insurance policies that they can get at 10.
I think that's the biggest question. It's a lose-lose situation. And I think I was listening to, it might have been DJ and Bucky this morning, and they said that they thought there was a lose-lose. I don't want to take that, but that's what they said. They said it was a lose-lose situation. You take a receiver, they're always going to ask why you didn't take offensive line. You take an offensive lineman, they're always going to ask why you didn't take the receiver. But the bottom line is, Matty, the position that matters the most between these two, especially, I know overall in football, is offensive line and protecting that quarterback blind or front side, left or right tackle. So that's the answer for me. It's pretty cut and dry when you really take the covers off and look at it, and especially look at the depth of this class. Let's go to Buffalo. Buffalo, a team that just excavated their top receiver, and they're now down to Justin Shorter currently, and Mac Hollins as their outside big guys. Khalil Shakir, of course, in this offense, and then they added a bevy of little guys in Curtis Samuel, Andy Isabella, KJ Hamler, some backups on the offensive line, including La'el Collins. I think that's an interesting addition. Trubisky's still there. He actually came back he was in Pittsburgh last year, came back. They added a bunch of depth on the defensive line on the interior, and then they signed one starter in Mike Edwards, the safety from the Kansas City Chiefs. When I look at this roster, I wish Kyer Elam could take a step forward and help this cornerback group, because I think they need it. Losing Tre'Davious White, cutting him. I think I heard the number was $51 million in dead cap between Trey White and Stephon Diggs. I got a lot of flack for a hypothetical trade of having Buffalo move up to pick 6 or pick 9 on Twitter last week, like close to 250,000 impressions. And I totally did. I thought I was like, well, I just want to float this out there, see if anyone has a thought.
Yeah.
And I guess, Bills Mafia hated it. And the Giants fans hated it. Giants hated it. Hated it. And I don't know. Some people will tell you that the Bills are in the middle of a rebuild. They're at the beginning of a rebuild. But they got Josh Allen. So that's really what matters, is they have the quarterback. Dalton Kincaid looks like their number one option right now. Where do you start as far as drafting and as far as targets and needs? They need a receiver. They could use a couple offensive linemen. They could definitely use a couple defensive linemen. They could definitely use a DB. So where does your mind go, Matty, when you're talking about building this team? Because Brandon Beane has a little bit of work ahead of him if he's going to get this thing kind of corrected, because this AFC East, mind you, New England's taking that step back, maybe 2 steps back. They get a quarterback this year, that could change the conversation. They get a Jaden Daniels, whatever, plug in, give him a +4 or 5 wins. You don't know what's going to happen. It could vault this team up into the Buffalo Bill conversation. It could be the Bills and Patriots fighting for a third with 6 and 7 wins this year, and chasing the Jets and Dolphins. So what do you think about these Bills?
Again, we did the Bills optimal draft strategy over at the Draft Rankings channel. So check that out in the Draft Rankings podcast. They got a lot of picks, so they can get a little crazy in a little bit of flexibility here. But in my opinion, Brandon Beane, it is a fireable offense if he does not come away with this draft with a difference maker at wide receiver. A fireable offense. So if you look through the course of the last few years, why was getting rid of AJ Brown okay? Well, not okay, but they tried to at least pick Treylon Burks to replace him. And when the Packers moved on from Adams, they went ahead and went buck wild, getting a slew of young guys to replace him. When you let someone of this caliber go, you have to be ready to replace it. And don't get it twisted. Josh Allen is Superman. But remember what he looked like pre-Stephon Diggs? Before he had that guy? He was very mistake-prone, very limited what he could do. And if they go into this year without another dog, and I ain't talking about a dog at 28, 27, wherever they pick, because Brian Thomas ain't saving this team. They need something better. They need to do the Julio Jones move. Brandon Beane needs to put his nuts on the table, let everybody know that he ain't messing around, and move up and get one of these big 3 receivers.
I would love to see them do that. I would love to see them move up to 6 or 9. I don't know what I would do if I was Buffalo. I saw some people floating out the idea of throwing Josh Allen, just saying, if you were an opposing team, asking what would it take. And I think what it would take is you'd probably get Brandon Beane's job. You'd get Sean McDermott's job. It takes 6 first-round picks, and Buffalo would probably sell the team if you were to trade away Josh Allen. So I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
I think they may just, like you said, it may look a little different. They may suffocate a little bit. You remember the day before Stephon Diggs was traded, there was a tweet that came out, and Diggs replied and said, "You sure? You sure that Josh Allen could do this without me?" So we'll see if he can indeed do it without him. 2 more teams here. First and foremost, the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins, of course, Mike McDaniel always looking for that wide receiver 3. He offered me the contract at the NFL Combine last year. I told him, hey, I'm a little heavy right now. I don't know if I could quite do it. So he didn't offer it to me this year, so I must still be too heavy. They got Braxton Berrios in there as their wide receiver 3. We'll see what they do in this NFL draft. They do that. Anthony Schwartz, River Craycraft. They got some speed there. I'm interested to see if they go after an Xavier Worthy, a Lad McConkey. They brought in Aaron Brewer to play center this year. They also signed Jonnu Smith to play tight end. So I know people were circling Miami as a potential tight end spot for this NFL draft. I was as well. But they went out and added Jonnu, who we saw do stuff last year in Atlanta. On the defensive side of the ball, this is where they got everybody. They brought in a ton of people on defense. Ciaran Neal and Jordan Poyer from Buffalo. On the interior, Tier Tart, they just signed this last week from Houston. He was in Tennessee as well last year. Actually, one of the better defensive tackles all year in 2023. Problem is, he's got a little bit of a, I guess you could say he carries a big briefcase, or he carries a big suitcase as far as to the stadium, to the locker room, things of that nature. We'll just put it that way. Benito Jones, Neville Gallimore, Isaiah Mack, Jonathan Harris. You can continue to go. Maybe my favorite, though, from a few years ago, the sack artist Shaquille Barrett is now in line to back up Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. Kendall Fuller also came over from Washington to come into this cornerback room. So they've added a ton of pieces. As I count it right here, I think it is 12 people, 12 players they've added to this defense in Miami. Where do you look at on this Miami team and think they need help outside of wide receiver 3? For me, center, of course, is a place to look. DB. That's about where my brain goes right now. They, of course, do not have a first-round pick. Their first selection in the draft is not until 55 overall.
They don't pick at 21? Did they trade it?
Did I miss that?
Yeah, they pick at 21.
I'm a dummy. They do pick at 21.
They need to trade back, though. That's probably where your brain's going. In my opinion, they got to trade back. They're kind of up against it in the cap. They need to fill out a lot of backups. They need more depth. They ran into injuries last year, and it was the death of their season. I think they need to move back. Oh, but if they want to stick and pick, they are in the prime range to get real difference makers. I think they're probably just outside of the J.C. Latham tier, but JPJ should be available. Graham Barton could be there for them. But either way, I think their best bet is to move back, get more picks, and then start filling in the offensive line throughout. A couple of guys that come to my mind in the second and third round: of Christian Haynes, Chris Mahogany, Cooper Beebe. Those are the type of interior linemen I'd love to see him go get later. And then you need more darts than what they have, because what you need when you're up against the cap is cheap rookies, guys on rookie deals, guys you could sprinkle in to fill in depth. That's why I think they must move back, because then it just makes selecting a running back late hurt less. Taking a third receiver, that hurts less if you can take them in the third and fourth round, and you have a smattering of picks that you can also bring in a linebacker. You can also bring in some pass rushing depth. You can bring in a corner. You need to bring in a bunch of guys. So I would move back at 21, especially because they are in a spot where I think that's going to be that range of which I was talking about the Chiefs moving up. Also, in my opinion, the way I kind of see it playing out is 21 might be prime to be the place someone has to move up to get wide receiver 4. We may not see a guy go from 10 to 21. Now, I think Worthy creeps up, because I think that speed talks and his start-stop ability sings in his profile. But I think 21 is going to be kind of that gatekeeper for receiver.
My problem was, Matty, last year their first-round pick was forfeited. And
it was last year. That's right.
So my brain,
Yeah, that's why we had the cockamamie 31 pick first round last year.
I think my brain went back to that. So my mistake on that. Let's talk about the New England Patriots. You're up in that neck of the wood. We're 35 minutes deep in some great conversation. Let's finish out with your New England Patriots. See if we can't long-wind this bitch into a 70-minute show. Jacoby Brissett, currently the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots. Austin Hooper fulfills the Mike Gesicki spot. They brought in KJ Osborne to be currently their second best receiver behind Demario Douglas, maybe? I don't know. Defense, they got Armon Watts, Sion Takitaki, Jalen Hawkins, bunch of backups. And their best free agent move of the offseason, I think me and Matty would both agree, is good old Tony G, Antonio Gibson, to come in and play a little RB, play a little receiver, play a little scat at H. He might play quarterback a little bit, Antonio Gibson. Spots of need for the New England Patriots. Of course, quarterbacks at the top of that list. Of course, receivers at the top of that list. I would love to see them add a quarterback at the top of round one and maybe come back and sprinkle. You might not love this, but I think just how this team's built right now, Ladd McConkey would be insufferable in fantasy football. And it's not because of the white receiver to New England. It's because of what's there. And thinking about him going there with a quarterback, a rookie quarterback, and getting just blitzed with targets as far as fantasy football, that would be beautiful. But I do think there's other needs. I think they need tackle. I think they need a linebacker. I think they could use edge. Keon White was a second-round pick last year, kind of talked about as a first-round pick. Matty, this is up in your neck of the woods. I want you to lay the land, and I want you to talk about it here because you're the one that's been listening to the local beat and the local radio the last, 30 years, 35 years.
So real quick on McConkey, just before I dive into the Patriots, we need to stop thinking about him as an Edelman or a Welker. He's not. Those dudes didn't run 4.39. He's
the same size as Justin Jefferson.
That's right. And he runs, look at his yards per out run at Georgia. He's not, he's not a gym rat, as they say during the draft show. He's not a gym rat. The guy's a legit receiver. So just by if you mock McConkey to the Patriots, don't think you're taking the easy way out. Just be like, oh, white receiver Patriots. First of all, Bill Belichick ain't there. And McConkey isn't your typical white guy. He's a full-ass receiver. He's just not your slot guy. Anyway, so I'm gonna try to be quick about this, but it's gonna be tough because it is up in my neck of the woods. It is a team that I follow very closely, and I do have some. I got birdies that talk to me up in this neck of the woods, and I did hear something that was very interesting, that there isn't a lot of continuity right now in the front office. Elliot Wolf, who you said is their newest GM, well, guess what? He's not been anointed GM. He's just the senior most team builder in that front office. I don't even know what his role really is. And before
player personnel,
right? It's not your full. It's not keys to the castle. So before Elliot Wolf was the ipso facto, the de facto
director of scouting and de facto GM. So he's really just the director of scouting.
That's correct. Right, exactly. So de facto GM, before that was kind of put on him. It wasn't given to him by Kraft or the Patriots. It was kind of put on him by all of us watching from the outside. There was thought that Jonathan Kraft, Robert Kraft's son, was going to take over the team building. And him and Robin Glazer, who Glazer's been there throughout most of the years of the dynasty. She's been a big part. She actually got I'm not going to call it a cockamamie promotion, but it was a promotion that no one's ever heard of. It's a long-winded kind of, I'm not trying to crap on the title or her job or her abilities. It's just if I were to give someone a promotion and they want the manager, but you're not the manager, but you're actually the supervisor leading, it's you're not really giving me the title. And she has one of those. And when my belief, there was a report that came out from one of the local beat guys that said that Elliot Wolf hasn't even shared who he's most interested at 3 with his team. And up here, they ripped it to shreds. How could that be? That ain't happening, blah, 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 blah. And when I read between the tea leaves and when I talk to my source, what it kind of sounds like, and again, this is speculation, this is alleged, this is not true, this is just kind of me taking a number of puzzle pieces and trying to make a complete picture. It sounds like there may be a divide between Elliot Wolf and Naismith. Is it Aaron Naismith? Aaron Naismith?
Lonzo Highsmith.
Lonzo Highsmith. That's it. I was thinking the guy for the Packers. I mean, the Steelers. Highsmith and Elliott are kind of one side, and Glazer and Kraft are on the other side. And there's this bit of who's going to get their guy, who's going to plant their flag on the build. And that's not good, especially with a rookie head coach who's never even been an official coordinator, was guaranteed this job before he ever interviewed, and had no real pressure from the outside to be pushed aside, with a, in my opinion, kind of lame duck offensive coordinator. He's got Ben McAdoo in his ear because apparently Ben McAdoo had some this Fugazi list where he thought Josh Allen was the best in the class, and he had Patrick Mahomes higher than most, and blah, 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 blah. So now he's some sort of QB guru. Well, guess where that kind of falls short? When you're taking the third quarterback of 3. You don't really need anybody there with a bunch of expertise to take the third quarterback of 3. And in my opinion,
you know what that tells me?
What's that?
It's Penix or Knicks.
Well, this is the other thing that's happened up here when they did the owners' breakfast in San Diego. And I don't know if you guys know that's it means a whale's vagina, San Diego. And shout out Anchorman. But over there they were talking to Gerard Mayo, they were talking to Robert Kraft, and both of them have been real chatty Cathys this offseason, which is again like, maybe Belichick was like that bunker, that bridge, that dam between a lot of this and none of this. Because they've been talking, and they let it slip not once but twice that they thought that there was 4 quarterbacks in this draft. And then he said, no, there's 5 quarterbacks. So that means McCarthy and Penix or Nix, one of those guys. So in my opinion, if I was running the team, they need to trade back. They need more picks. I would be happier to see them trade back, get more picks, because Elliott Wolf did say that he'd like to stockpile picks. Start peppering this offensive line. This offensive line's crap. I don't think they need to do a ton to the defense. I think it's solid, but bring in some bodies at wide receiver, because you can run from it, you can hide from it. But right now, Antonio Gibson is their best player on offense, point blank period. And that's not going to win you a lot of football games.